everybody. Welcome back to my workshop and welcome back to my garage. So what we're going to be covering is basically getting the neck up to this point right here. I've got the headstock bound, I've got my fret marker inlays done, and I've got my side dots completed on this. Basically what I did, I used a tortoiseshell binding for the headstock. I used a smaller or thinner binding than what I did for the side of the neck to kind of give it that little bit of offset. I think it looks really good. For the fret markers, what I did is I used copper tubing, and then I filled that with crushed turquoise and flooded it with super glue and then sanded it back level with the fretboard. For the side dots, I used copper tubing as well, and then I filled that with glow-in-the-dark powder and then flooded that with super glue. After it cured, I sanded it back level. So the neck is looking really good up to this point. So let's get rolling on what I did. All right, so I'm about to route the binding channel into the headstock. I've went ahead and added a spacer. That way I can get the headstock flat down on my router table. I looked at several different options, whether I could use my Dremel tool with the precision router bits from StewMac, and it just didn't work around these corners. The headstock just wasn't shaped properly to allow that to happen. So what I've done is I've loaded up my router table with my cutting bit. I'm going to use the same thickness binding that I used on the neck, so I think that's going to look pretty good. It's just not going to be as deep, so it'll be cut a little shallower. But let's give it a try and see what happens. All right, so that's worked perfectly. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I've got a nice channel cut all the way around my headstock, right at the proper depth. No tear out on the walnut, which is perfect. So what I'll be doing with this is I'm going to be using the same thickness binding. I'm going to have to use my heat gun to get around the corners, to make it go around the corners properly. But I think with some slow gluing, clamping, get the sides glued as much as I can, and then heat it up, go around, I think I should be in good shape. Okay, so what I'm getting ready to do now is I'm getting ready to heat the binding so I can get it around these bends. I want to use a solid piece of binding on the whole thing. I don't want any cuts in it. So I'm going to pre-form the binding using a heat gun to get it around these corners. That way it'll be easier to glue down when the time comes. All right, there we go. It's pretty much heated and tentatively formed. So that means when I go to glue it, it's going to glue much easier now. There we go. Now it's just a matter of gluing it and putting it in. It's going to work much better this way. All right, so what I've got is my brush. I've got my glue ready. I got some tape strips ready, and I'm getting ready to glue the binding in. So it's just going to be a matter of putting some binding in the channel, wiping it around. It's got about a 2-minute activation time, work time on the glue. That should give me time to get pieces done of it as I go around. So let's get going. I've let this binding dry overnight, so now it's time to go ahead and pull the tape off and take a look and see what we got. All right, the binding is right down against the bottom of the channel. I may have a little bit of filling to do right here at the tip. We'll see once I get it scraped back. But now that's the next thing to do, is get this scraped off, and Let's see what we've got. And like I said, I'll just take my scraper and scrape this binding down flat. And then here I'm just scraping the sides. Alright, overall this came out really nice. I had a little bit of fill to do right up here at the top, and that came out well. I have this one spot here that the binding didn't glue quite properly, so I've got it re-glued and taped down. We'll let that cure. I've got it scraped back so it's even with the sides, no gaps. I think that's going to look really good when it's all said and done. We'll get this last little bit after it cures. We'll get that scraped tomorrow, the glue done, and we can move on to the next steps. So this is video number 6 in my Great Guitar Build-Off Scratch Build entry. So far the build is coming along really great. I've got some minor errors that I went through and worked through, but those have been corrected, and it's turning out to be a good looking guitar. So please, if you like what I'm doing, click like and subscribe, and leave a comment below if there's anything that you'd like to see. Maybe I could do something different. Give me your input. Just let me know what you're thinking. I appreciate you stopping by the channel. It's time to start doing the side dots on the fretboard, or on the neck. And what I've got from Maximum Guitar Works is the side dot drilling jig. Basically what you do with this is you lay your neck in. This brace right here will adjust up and down to lock your neck into place. You slide your neck along to line it up with the jig. And I'm going to use 2mm holes on it. So it's got holes marked out for 2mm, 3mm, and then 3/32, and I'm going to use the 3mm ones, or excuse me, the 2mm. Basically, you line your neck up. I've got it in spot for the third fret. I've marked that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and clamp it in place. That way it doesn't move on me. Make sure it's straight and level with each other. There we go. That's where I want it. To make sure that I don't go too deep, I'm going to put my drill bit in one of the holes, and then I'm going to mark it how deep I want the hole to be. This way when I tap my brass in, it'll go just deep enough to, it's actually copper tubing, that would go just deep enough for me to have a little bit left over to file off. Should be able to unclamp this now and have nice holes drilled all the way along. Don't know how well that's showing up, but I've got nice holes drilled at my frets. Now what I can do is get the brass prepped, or the copper, put the copper tubing in, glue it in, and then after that's dried, make sure the insides are clean, pack it with the glow-in-the-dark powder, and we'll be ready. So like I said, I've got a drop of super glue on each hole. And it's just a matter of putting my brass tubing or my copper tubing in place and hammering it down. Then just wipe off the excess glue. There we go. Don't know how well that comes out in the camera, but I got the brass or the copper inserts in. They're nice and straight. Now it's just a matter of once the glue dries, I'll hit it a little bit with a file. Make sure they're all level and let that glue dry really well, and then I can put the glow-in-the-dark powder in, and then the same thing, just another little bit of super glue, and lock that in. Alright, it's time to start looking at drilling the fret markers into the fretboard. What I've decided to do is go with the brass or a copper ring. I'll put that in first, and then I'll fill that with some gemstone, probably turquoise, inside that. I think that'll go really good with this color. I've done a couple test pieces and it looks like it's going to go pretty good. So let's get rolling. So the first thing I want to do is reestablish my center line on my neck. So I've got some tape here, and I'm just going to go with my Incra here and find the center. Center's marked at the top. Now do the same thing at the bottom. All right, there's my center line established at the bottom. So what I've done is I've got tape laid down on my frets or on the fingerboard. I'm going to go ahead and draw my line, my center line all the way down. But the reason why I got this board, the tape here, is so that I can mark the location on the tape of what the center line is. So I've got center lines marked on all the frets. Then what I can do now is go and find the center of each one, mark that as well. That way I'll know where to drill my spots. And using the center finding feature on this inker is really neat. You just basically line it up. It's got numbers going from 0 on each side. I can run those out to the fret slots. 17.5 on each side. Just mark my center. So that gives kind of a look on what it's going to look like once these get all put in. I've got all the fret markers now filled with the turquoise. Filled as much as I could get it, tried to fill any gaps or anything like that. It's setting up just a little bit higher than what the fretboard is. That way I'll have some area to sand back once the super glue dries. But now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flood this with super glue. I could use activator on it, but I really want to just flood it and let it sink in to make sure I'm getting all the way to the bottom. I've let this sit overnight and the glue is hardened. I didn't want to use activator on it. I wanted to let the super glue just soak in as much as it possibly could. So now it's time to go ahead and polish down each of these spots and get the glue residue off, and also polish down the stone to get it to the level I want it to be. So it's a nice smooth fretboard. So in order to get these down level, basically all I'm going to do is just use a combination of files, sanding beam, and then eventually go to my radiusing block just to make sure everything stays the same. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of file the initial bit down. So that's going to wrap up this video. The neck is coming along great. In the next video, we're actually going to go over carving the neck. So please click like and subscribe. If you like what I'm doing, please leave a comment below if there's anything I could do better. I really appreciate everybody stopping by the channel. Until next time, take care.